The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are not those of New Zambia or its employees, but of the presenter and the respective guest. The New Zambia podcast is powered and proudly brought to you by New Zambia Media.
Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of the New Zambia podcast, and I'm your host Wezi and with my co-host
Mutepa. Nice to be here.
Absolutely, it's always great to be here. You guys are amazing. So in today's discussion, I would like to invite Mutepa to just lead us on what we are talking about today. Mutepa, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Today we're going to be tackling a topic which most of you have probably heard of, but never probably really thought about. We're going to be tackling generational wealth. You might wonder, generational wealth, what is it exactly? In its simplest terms, it might seem like a very simple concept, but I think we can look at it in terms of, I'll start, I think, from my view of what I think generational wealth is. Well, basically, I think generational wealth is a concept where a family passes on the significant amount of assets and resources which are left for future generations. I don't know if that makes sense to you, Wezi.
Yeah, it does. I think it does, because it's almost the same with what I'm thinking about. For me, I think of generational wealth as wealth that is created to sustain a current and future generation. So for me, I look at it not to be just for a future generation, but also the current. Because if I am able to sustain myself right now, then it means at least there's always an assurance. There's an assurance that even the next generation,
but we have to make sure that we don't mix it up with probably legacy and inheritance. Generational wealth is slightly different in that you are creating a higher foundation for the next generation to start from than where your foundation was. So if you look at our parents, probably had to dig the foundation to build the house.
Yes.
But the house, we haven't moved into the house. So we probably find the house, depending on what your parents set up, you will probably find the house at window level, and we'll need to build it from there. Other families would have prepared themselves, and you see, generational wealth does not necessarily mean that because two people are of the same age, that their generational wealth should be the same, because it depends on when the initiator of that family started to build that generational wealth. So I might be of the same age with a different colleague, and our generational wealth when I was born would be a complete house, when my colleague's generational wealth would be a house at window level. But it doesn't matter what level it is. What matters is that we're building that generational wealth. Wezi, there are two things in Zambia that become frustrating when we're talking about this subject. The first thing is the taboo of talking about death. We all fear talking about death. I mean, even just the number of people that write wills and leave wills behind is very, very small.
But what do you think is the case, though? Is it because of our tradition, or
I think it is traditional, hey? I think it is traditional.
Because I remember when growing up, when I was a kid, whatever I hear of a funeral, it would really, really, really scare me off. Even sleeping at night would just be like, I don't know, what's the mystery behind?
No, I mean, I think our traditions were very focused on spirituality and things like that, and then with coming in of Christianity, I think there's a little bit of a mismatch there, maybe, and basically it breeds fear because we talk of hell and things like that, and people don't want to, people don't want to talk about that. And there's also the thing of the unknown. I mean, you might die, and what have you been working for? What is all of this for? So there are all those questions behind that. But but that's one aspect. But the other aspect, I don't know where this thing comes from. I think it's not, mainly in Zambia I see it, but all over the world you get this phenomenon where they call being born with a silver spoon is looked at as a derogatory term, something that is bad, or we are better than you because we've had to fight what we have, rather than have different approaches to the issue.
I think that is really sad though, because I mean the whole concept of us working hard is obviously to build a culture of, I like there's this bus company that has got a slogan called a culture of continuous improvement. So like you are giving an example, right, of generational wealth, where you say maybe parents have started building something, a house, and then they reach it at a certain level, and all. Then for us, our job is to to carry on the baton and just take it to the next level. So I think the whole concept of people thinking that no, someone is getting it on a silver platter is I think it's wrong, because we are working hard, obviously. And there's this other thing. For me, I believe that, because I like nice things, so I have to work, towards achieving those things. And it's not necessary. I know I've actually received a lot of critics from my peers who said, no, you can't say that you're working for yourself. You have to work for your children and all. But I mean, if I'm living comfortably, it's an obvious situation. It's an obvious case that my children also are going to be, benefiting from that.
Yes, Wezi. I mean, when you talk about that, you're setting a standard, basically.
Exactly.
You're setting a standard. So if you like nice things and you set a standard, that's part of the generational wealth, because that's a legacy. Yeah. You see, when we're talking about generational wealth, we're not just talking about leaving cash behind. We're talking about leaving a legacy, leaving assets, So the next generation will know that, oh, look, our father was at this level, Our father, every morning he dressed up in a suit, went for work, or even if he didn't go to the office, but he always dressed smart. I mean, that would be something that they've seen, and that would be a benchmark that they set for themselves in order to move forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, like I said, we should never look at being born with a silver. We should embrace being born with a silver spoon and hope to pass it on. Maybe you were born with a tin spoon. Let's hope that the next generation, you leave them a copper spoon, and the next generation will have a silver spoon, and the next generation will leave a gold spoon. Yeah. And that's how we should look at generational wealth. And this will help generations throughout, in that when you talk about fortunes and money, there's statistics out there that show that 90%, I think 90% of all lottery winners who've won big, huge jackpots either end up right back where they started from, or worse off to where they started from. Really? Reason being is that money doesn't just sort out everything. Money is not the solution to all your problems. You have to earn that money. You have to feel like that money has a sense of responsibility behind it. And then I know the question that you might ask is that, am I not contradicting myself now because someone born with a silver spoon didn't earn that money? But in essence, they did, because if when we're building generational wealth, when we are seeing that wealth being built up, because it's being built up in our presence as we're growing up, we see the hard work that's being put across, and if we are the ones that are building that generational wealth, we also have to instill in our children that what I'm doing is not for you, but it's for your children. So it's your responsibility to take care of what we're building.
Actually, talking about, sorry to cut you short. Actually, talking about the same where a parent is telling the children that what I'm building right now is not for you, but it's for my children. Let me refer to the Bible. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22. The Bible talks about a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So which is like exactly what you just putting across.
Yeah, I mean. A lot of these principles are cross-cutting. I can give you a quote from Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali said that the seed that we plant today, he said that the person who plants a seed does not enjoy the shelter of the tree that comes from that seed. You see, our job is just to plant the seed, take care of the seed, nurture the seed, and that shelter will be for future generations. Yeah, so that's where we have to be careful when we're building generational wealth. We shouldn't build it in isolation. It should be in combination with the whole family, so that they know that it's hard work that has gotten it there, so that they don't fall into that lottery trap where once you are gone, they'll be like, oh man, dad was such a hard man, he had so much money and we never used to spend it, and then when you're gone, instead of continuing building what you're doing, they just go on holidays to Dubai and Las Vegas and leave nothing for the future. So when our children know that everything, the luxury they have is a privilege, they work towards keeping that privilege. I think an extreme example of this is, look at the royal family, the British royal family. That's generational wealth. For centuries, that generational wealth has been growing. How the wealth came about, something a little bit controversial to talk about here, but a lot of stories,
a lot of stories. There's a lot of history behind that.
Oh, yes. But that's a story for another day. But if you look at the current crop, Prince William, Prince Harry, we all think that they have all this luxury and access to all this wealth, which they do. But with that wealth comes huge responsibility, which a lifestyle they have to live, certain protocols they have to follow, and things like that. So in order to build generational wealth, you have to understand the responsibility that lies beyond it.
Talking about the responsibilities, when I was just reading, because for me, for a very long time, I used to think generational wealth is just, for the next generation, and it can only be transferred if after the demise of maybe the people that were, handling or taking care of everything, But again, I just came to learn that it's actually in two ways. The transferring of the same wealth is like it can be transferred like in the now, and I was shocked to see. Okay, so even the empowering of children to say maybe sending them to school, giving them gifts, and maybe for those business people maybe capital and stuff. Oh, so this is also part of the whole process. Definitely. It's not just about after someone dies, they will the inheritance, that kind of thing.
That's why in the introduction I said that generational wealth goes beyond just an inheritance. It's a whole lifestyle. That's why when we say generational wealth, we shouldn't just link wealth to monetary form. There's a wealth in knowledge that you can leave behind. There's a wealth, what you're passing on. Your generation might come across you're probably living through a generation where the country or the world is going through a hard time, and you're not able to pass on the amount of wealth that was passed on to you. It doesn't mean that you're not passing on the baton, but during that period, you just do the best to safeguard the wealth that was passed on to you, and maybe in your generation, more knowledge is transferred to the next generation in order for them to pass on to future generations. So it's not just about passing on generational wealth, passing on money. It's about passing on resources. And when I say resources,
the name too, I guess. The name too, because I mean, there's pride in, there's people where there's pride in the name.
Yes.
Yeah, there's pride in the name. And even though things, like you have said, since generation differ, and sometimes economies also differ, so there's always that thing, I think, because you have a good name, or you have a certain, I'm sure you've heard of names that are attached to certain, like in Zambia, like we bring it back here home. There are some names that are just known to be like in the political circles, and
Yes.
So it's always, I think, it's always about also the name itself as well. Even if, like you have said, since it's not just wealth, but it's just a number of factors that. That can.
I mean, we do have things like the political elite, and it's not. We always say, why is it always the same names in politics?
Exactly.
It's because it's the generational wealth that's being passed down in their family. The knowledge of politics, the knowledge of public service. There's certain families, they may not have much, but they always, no matter at what level, they always want to serve their communities. And that's what is being passed down in their generation. I'll give you another example of, it's not just passing it down within your family.
I was actually thinking about that.
A good example of that is in America. Benjamin Franklin, 18, I can't remember what year it was, but he left Philadelphia and Boston, $2,000 investment. And he said, that's before he died, and he said that the two cities can't touch the money for 200 years. The money
$2,000 that left.
Yeah, $2,000 at that time. Well, it was $2,000 in today's money anyway. So what had happened was that 200 years came to pass in 1990. And both the city of Philadelphia and Boston received a payout of $6.5 million.
Whoa.
In any time, that is a lot of money. Wow. It's not just America where we say that they've got resources. I mean, city of Boston, city of Philadelphia, to receive a payment of $6.5 million. Can you imagine if any member of our community was to say that he'll leave even $50,000 to the city of Ndola, but no one's to touch it for the next 200 years, what that money would be, and what it would be able to do for Ndola at that time.
At that time,
so that's what generational wealth is. It's being able to help future generations even when you're not there.
So now, for those people that say, that overlook those people in a, that say, no, these are just born, they were just born with a silver platter, with a silver spoon, rather. And how can they amass the wealth?
They have to change their mindset. They have to change their mindset. And that's what this podcast is also all about. It's about reaching out to people, and we're not the masters of information. We just have ideas, and we're sharing ideas and beginning a conversation.
Exactly.
So I think that people, for us to grow, we are all patriotic Zambians, and we all want better for our country. So I think that if we say, if my family does better, Ndola will do better. And if 10 families are doing better in Ndola, Ndola is doing 10 times better. So even those people who think that generational wealth or leaving a silver spoon is a bad thing, or we have to all work hard for what... Yes, we do have to work hard for what we have, but we don't always have to start from the bottom. And the question I'll have for those people is, I'll put it back to them, is why do you wake up in the morning and go to work? Do you work just for you to get dressed properly? Or then the other question is, why did you have kids? What do you want for your kids? We all want better for our kids. We all want better for our kids. And with that mindset change, that's the beginning of generational wealth.
One of my older brothers has always told me, and he's always told me to say, you know what, Wezi, give yourself a standard. Because if you do not give yourself a standard, no one else will. You don't have to wait for someone to give you a standard. So in thinking, what the standard is all about, that has really pushed me to, to just start looking at things differently, and like just, looking at everything as a platform where I can learn something out of it and make the best of what I can, just like that. So talking about how one can create wealth, I also came upon, the power of financial literacy. Financial literacy as one of the main ways in which someone can create wealth. Because if you know things about how to, about spending, how you can spend, and just how you can build a lot of stuff, how you can build finance, just having knowledge about finance is a very, very vital component in trying to bring up, to create wealth for your life.
I'm very glad over the past 5-6 years or so, our education system has shifted. I think we started talking entrepreneurship a little early before the system changed to entrepreneurship, but now as early as grade 5, entrepreneurship is being taught. Budgeting is being taught. Expenditure is being taught. And what that does is, these terms, you grow up with them, so they do not become obscure, or they're not theories. They're things that you live with. And once that is taught at school, it's taught at home, it's entrenched in the child. And then the other thing, when you talk about financial literacy, is that's one aspect. The other aspect is when we talk about stocks, bonds, savings, and other financial instruments. We need to learn, because you look at Zambia, there's very little private participation on the stock market. Reason being, there are no immediate returns. But we need to talk about the stock market in terms of, this is, if you have, like we talked about Benjamin Franklin's $2,000. The stock market can be your $2,000 for your family. And you tie that up and say that, look, I don't know, these guys can come and have a look at it at 30 years from now. Let's see where that will be, And you have someone monitoring that, you have a broker monitoring that and keeping that for you. And so that's how, assets, things like property, those things, there's certain families that leave behind property, but they'll put a caveat on the property and say that, look, I've left this for my son, but my son is 16 years old at the moment. And I think we'll put a caveat on it and say that he cannot transact on this property until he's 40.
Even trusts, huh?
Yes, we need to learn about putting up trusts and helping. I think the story was one of these billionaires. He's got 2 kids. And what he did was, he set up a trust, and the trust entailed that the kids, after a certain age, got a once-off payment of, I think it was about $1 million or $500,000.
Okay.
And then thereon, the trust had been set up that each child just gets paid double of what they earned that year.
Oh, wow.
So it's up to the child to work harder if they want to access more from the trust. So certain things like that, little clever things like that will help build generational wealth. So generational wealth is not just about leaving money behind, but it's about leaving the tools and the resources to keep building on what has been left behind.
So what are the challenges, really? What do you think are the challenges for one to start creating this wealth?
First challenge,
Because I think for me, I can only think of the advantages, the beauty of creating that. I don't really, look at the, much on the negative side, because
I don't think there's much on the negative side. The only thing I can say, the challenge that you'd find on the negative side is if you have a big family and let's say your generational wealth or the family industry, whatever, is maybe in transport, and transport is how the family makes its money and whatever. And every child is different, and you have one child in this generation who's an artist. How does that child participate and become part of that thing and that?
I've chosen my own path, so I don't want to do anything. Just if it's like that, just give me my share.
Just give me my share and let me move on and things like that. But that's a challenge. But in it, everyone can contribute differently. Like I said, it's not just about leaving money; it's about leaving a legacy. So that artist can probably take care of the marketing side of the operation or something like that. There's always a part to play, but I think that's one of the challenges, that you have one that might not be interested in the family business.
Yeah. Now, talking about that as we are closing, I like how, because I think when most in our setup, when you think of family wealth, especially in our setup here, in terms of business, that is, most of the times the people that come to our mind, I don't know if to most of us rather, is are the Indians. How they build their businesses, and these are people you have they've been running businesses for a very long time, and generations have been passing just to.
And you see that's a very brilliant example that you've brought up. Our Asian brothers, I think it's a cultural thing, like we said before, because a lot of their families are in trading, and you'd find from the 60s, unless we do a little bit of research, but we'll find why they naturally fell into trading. But I think if you look at the history of the world in terms of the Indians, the Asians, Chinese, the Middle Easterns, they all did the silk trade and the spice trade, and I think naturally that's where they fall in. But that's just a little bit of history. But what it is when they fell into trading, that was their bread and butter. So at an early age, the children are brought into the shop, and they see that this is our bread and butter, and this is how the money is made, and they continue the legacy. Unfortunately, if you look at ourselves as Zambians, black Zambians, we've had a problem of the patriarch or the initiator of the wealth not wanting to. I think it's a cultural thing of, if I give these kids a lot of money, or if I show them how we make our money, they'll become spoiled. You want to keep children as children. You don't want to let them grow up. I don't know. I think that's my thought on that. So I think in terms of the generational wealth with our Indian brothers or Asian brothers, growing it, how they grow it, we learn from that, And you see, there's an example of, unfortunately, in the mid to late 90s, a lot of patriarchs in these families were lost to HIV/AIDS, and and you quickly saw that a lot of Zambian companies never lived beyond the proprietor or the initiator. And that's because there's rarely a plan of succession. And I think that's a takeaway. I think as we wind up, that will be a takeaway. As in whatever we're doing, let's set up a succession plan. No matter how small, no matter how small you think you are, you set up a succession plan. Even if it's a step, going back to our building analogy, even if it's a block that you've left behind for your children to start with, that is one block less than they'll have to buy to get started with the building the generation wealth for the next generation.
There's a point where you know where they're going to start from. Yeah. All right. So in closing, Mutepa, what's your concluding remarks? What are your concluding remarks?
My concluding remarks are: let's work together. Let's be patriotic, and let's build. In building our families, we're building the nation. In building our families, we're building the nation, because a nation is just a collective of families.
I like that. I like that one. So, wow, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. See you in the next episode.
Yes.
Yeah, so this has been Wezi and
Mutepa here.
Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye and God bless you.
Yes, that has been another episode of the New Zambia podcast. Thank you so much for spending the time with us and sharing. I know your time is valuable, but I hope it was time well spent with us. Thank you. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and give us feedback on what you think of our podcast. We really appreciate of your comments, and to let us know. All the feedback is very, very helpful, either good or bad.